Hi, my name is Megan Lyons, and today I will be presenting my work entitled Beach Out of Reach, Amy Beach's Search for Stylistic Individualism. This presentation will be divided into two parts. In the first part, I will outline the history of Amy Beach's composing journey. In particular, we will examine her musical influences and how others controlled her career path. After revealing the moment where Amy Beach was freed from those influences, Part 2 will feature several case studies of her art songs. We will analyze her first song, The Rainy Day, a prelude which features text by her husband, Ein altes Gebet, which was her first song published after a 3-year hiatus, and When Mama Sings, which features text by Beach herself. The question this presentation seeks to answer is what Amy Beach's individual style was through analyzing her large corpus of art songs. Amy Beach was raised in the middle-class Cheney family with musically gifted relatives and parents who wanted her to prosper. A thoroughly gifted child, Beach had an exceptional memory and was able to memorize songs even as a toddler. Her love of songs and piano were fostered by her mother, who played piano herself, though her mother was hesitant to allow her to formally study. Once her parents realized her potential as a musical prodigy, Amy Beach was pulled back from the spotlight. Adrian Freed Block, an Amy Beach scholar, wrote, "A musical girl could perform as a private person, but child prodigies were often the victims of exploitation and notoriety." Her parents wanted her to grow up a well-rounded, normal child and felt that the identity of prodigy would prevent such a thing from occurring. Though she was permitted to give some public recitals and study with select professional musicians, Beach was barred from the European study that her contemporaries benefited from. Both her parents and Wilhelm Gericke, conductor of the Boston Symphony Orchestra, stood in her way of a European tour. Instead, Gericke suggested that she become an autodidact while studying the great works of the past, a move that likely changed the course of her performance and compositional career. Soon after her 18th birthday, Amy Cheney married the older, well-established Dr. Henry Beach. As was the custom in 1885, she took on his name and would be formally known as Mrs. H.H.A. Beach for the rest of her life. Dr. Beach would further the control Amy Beach's parents asserted over her, preventing her from studying with any compositional teachers and limiting her performance opportunities. Rather than allowing external forces to influence her work, he pushed his wife to pursue composing and performing in private. Her performances would be limited to a rare recital and an abundance of charity functions. However, as a white, upper-class wife of a physician, Beach had the time and financial means to pursue her compositional career, a luxury that other female artists did not have at this time. Dr. Beach had an image to maintain in his social sphere, and his wife's musical aspirations could impact their success as a couple in Boston at the time. Having been limited in her performances on piano, Beach turned to composing both large and small-scale musical works, the most abundant being her art songs. Art songs offered a way for Beach to both compose in a sophisticated art form while maintaining her feminine image. Beach composed art songs consistently throughout her long compositional career, and their role in allowing an emotional output cannot be understated. In a way, her composing of art songs acted as a diary, where she could express her inner turmoil or joy through music. One could argue that any composition may serve as an emotional outlet for any composer. This is true, but Amy Beach was no ordinary composer. She was an upper-class wife of a successful surgeon, someone who had an image to maintain. Art song provided a private outlet for her personal thoughts, since the genre was intended for the privacy of one's home and a lone singer. Dr. Beach was involved in his wife's art songs, coming home from work and asking the same question each day: "What did you compose today, dear?" They would discuss the new work, and sometimes Dr. Beach himself would sing the vocal line while Amy accompanied on piano. This was an incredibly personal process, and one that allowed Amy Beach to express her emotions to herself and to her husband. Her 10th rule in her own 10 Commandments emphasizes that you must first have something to say, something which demands expression from the depths of your soul. Amy Beach had plenty to say, and was able to express this through her music, and her art songs specifically. On June 28, 1910, Dr. Henry Beach passed away. Not even 1 year later, Amy Beach's mother Clara passed away on February 18, 1911. Her mother and husband controlled her musical and personal life, and their passing was a pivotal moment in her career. There is no better way for one to work through their emotions than to release them. In the case of Amy Beach, she released those emotions through her songs. Her art songs, acting as a musical diary, reflect the musical control of her loved ones prior to 1910 and the subsequent freedom she experienced after their deaths in 1911. The Rainy Day is Amy Beach's first art song, published without an opus number when she was only 16 years old, though it was written several years earlier. As a woman with synesthesia, she associated keys and modes with specific colors. The minor F mode was one she associated with sadness and the color black, and aligns with the text written by Robert Longfellow. Beach was known for imitating previous composers and pieces, which she did in this first art song. The opening melody is borrowed and adapted from the final movement of Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata. The simplicity of the strophic song and the imitation of a great composer reflects Beach's young age and her confusion of what her own musical style is. Let's listen to the opening phrase.
The day is cold and dark and dreary. It rains and the wind is never weary.
Beach was likely feeling sad, dark, and dreary when she wrote this song. Adrian Block writes, Beach feels the need to end a piece that begins in the minor mode by moving into the tonic major, achieving both resolution and transcendence. This first song does not transcend, and therefore does not resolve according to Beach herself. Beach does not know her individual style at this young age, but uses the genre of art song to experiment and learn more about herself. Dr. Beach undoubtedly influenced his wife's compositions, leaving his mark in a literal and literary way. Amy Beach set 6 of his poems to music from 1887 to 1910, never returning to her husband's texts after his death. A prelude is the final of these 6 songs. Dr. Beach's writing style may be best described as pre-Raphaelite, defined by commitment to sincerity, simplicity, and seriousness. It does feature a dichotomy between oppositions such as light and dark, which is a staple of most texts set to song by Amy Beach. The piano introduction begins in D minor, and the concept of darkness is realized in the music. Leaps of a tritone occur in the vocal melody, emphasizing the dark text of shadowy. The final words of the first stanza foreshadow the thematic shift from dark to light by saying, in light. Beach manifests this switch through modal mixture, as the harmony under the word light is a major 1 chord rather than the minor 1 chord. The first stanza presents musical irony, as the text states one thing while the music says it is not so. In light, over a major chord, is immediately undermined in the treble line of the piano. The high F sharp in the voice is transferred to the piano and gives way to F natural. Major becomes minor once again, suggesting the light was temporary. This switch is carried out on a larger scale as the piece begins in D minor, yet closes in D major. Let's listen to the first stanza.
Now flush with amber, pearl, and gold, ye luminous clouds of night, that float away with a shadowy world, while darkness melts in light, in light.
In this song, Beach achieved her version of transcendence by moving from the minor tonic to the major tonic. She has achieved one level of resolution, yet there is still a sense of conflict within this song and with Beach's compositional style. Comparing the styles of Dr. Beach's poetry to that of Amy Beach's composition, they are analogous to the dark and light in this poem. The pre-Raphaelite, simplistic, past-focused poetry of Dr. Beach is the opposite of Amy Beach's romantic, elaborate, and more modern compositional style. The dual sound world of major and minor modes is reminiscent of the duality between Dr. and Mrs. Beach, and further supports the assertion that Amy Beach was still searching for her own individual style at this time. After the death of her husband and mother, Amy Beach ventured to Europe for both a change of scenery and to finally experience the European musical stage that she had always yearned for. There is a 4-year gap between Opus 71, a prelude, and Opus 72, which was published in 1914. The first song of Opus 72, Ein altes Gebet, shows a drastic change. It is written in German, likely from her new European influence, and it is much more chromatic than her previous songs. The text of this song, by German theologian Christian Wilhelm Spieker, features the narrator praying to their God for protection and wisdom. Amy Beach was no stranger to composing for religious events or with religious texts. This prayer in particular has strong connections to the loss of her mother and husband. The final line of text asks for protection and guidance. Perhaps Amy Beach was asking for these from her loved ones in heaven. This text features some of the pre-Raphaelite language that was preferred by Dr. Beach, but the simplistic narrative is abandoned. The prayer has a more complex meaning, and Beach's setting of the text adds to its elaborate nature. The dichotomy between major and minor is still present in this song, but in a more nuanced and sophisticated manner. An ostinato figure in the piano highlights both F major and F minor, with the voice often alternating between these key areas as well. This ostinato figure is present in all but 2 sections of this song. Under the text, "Oh then might I dread no morrow, gladness would dispel each sorrow," a chorale texture is used along with a relatively simple cadential progression. The ostinato figure returns, slightly altered, but still presenting the dichotomy between major and minor in a similar fashion, with the A natural and the A flat. In the second stanza, the ostinato figure returns, but is abandoned for a chromatic chorale this time. The piano steps down chromatically, moving from scale degree 1 in the bass to flat 6. Once again, Beach presents a moment of musical irony. The text asks God to faithfully watch over the narrator, yet the flat 6 in the bass and resulting chords contrast that sentiment. A flat 6-7 chord gives way, through chromatic descent, to a 2 diminished chord. The same sense of ambiguity and irony continues through the final moments of the song as the second ostinato figure with the A naturals and A flats returns to undermine what the prayer has been asking for.
Und stieg ich in den tiefsten Ort, den nie ein Maß ergründet. Du bist es, der mich hier und dort und
Amy Beach seemed to achieve some sense of musical freedom after those who controlled her life were no longer in the equation. The question remains if she ever truly found her own individual style once she gained this sense of freedom. She imitated famous pieces and composers in her earlier works, and her compositional creativity was limited by those who controlled her life. Even after the death of her husband and mother, their influence was still apparent in her art songs. Arguably the most individualistic song she ever wrote, Amy Beach set 4 of her songs to her own texts. In the three earlier songs, her text and music often present different narratives, a musical irony which shows inner emotional turmoil through Beach's use of modal mixture. These texts also featured the older English writing style that her husband preferred. The fourth song, composed after her husband's and mother's deaths, abandons musical irony and presents Beach's emotions with a renewed sense of clarity. She no longer mimics her husband's Old English writing style in her texts and finds a new emotional depth through her writing of a more complex and symbolic narrative. The poem tells a story of a young boy going to see his mother sing at a church. After hearing the entire story, one can interpret that the mother has actually died. Certain lines in the poem allude to this, such as, "She told me not to cry, for God would take care of me. She says I must be very good and brave, just like a man. And sometime I'll live up there, as only angels can." The little boy appears to be going to church to speak to his departed mother, stating, "I wish she wouldn't stay," and implying that his mother cannot leave the church. This text is the polar opposite of the three previous texts, telling a complex story with identifiable characters. Unlike the majority of the songs discussed so far, such as The Rainy Day or A Prelude, this song outlines an arpeggiated ascent rather than a descent. Beach does carry over some compositional features from her prior style period, most importantly her use of modal mixture. The third stanza shifts to the parallel minor, and the major-minor dichotomy takes on a deeper meaning in this song. When the mother of the boy is present, G major is used, and when he cannot find her, G minor is used. The question of whether Amy Beach ever found her individual style is one that may never be answered. Looking at just a few of her art songs, it is clear her style evolved over time. She began by imitating famous composers, was influenced by her husband and his preferences, and eventually found some freedom after his passing. Perhaps Amy Beach's individual style is a reflection of her home, the United States. Her style is an amalgamation of various other styles. My work with Amy Beach's art songs will continue, as they are her largest body of work yet have little scholarship on them. I look forward to seeing how her musical diary of art songs reveal her true artistry. Thank you.